Fight fans, welcome to the PBC Podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Bouhairie and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome, everyone, to the PBC Podcast. I'm Kenneth Bouhairie.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
Thanks, as always, for tuning in. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button wherever you found the PBC Podcast. This week, we've got former unified welterweight champion Keith Thurman joining us. Plus, we're going to look back at last weekend's big welterweight bout and look ahead to a potential fight of the year candidate, the 122-pound world title unification between WBC champ Brandon Figueroa and WBO champ Stephen Fulton. That's Saturday night Showtime Championship Boxing, presented, of course, by Premier Boxing Champions. We can't wait to break that down. And in today's toe-to-toe section, Mike and I will list our top 5 pound-for-pounders today. But first, some interesting news out of the WBC convention last week. Eddie Reynoso, manager and trainer of Canelo Alvarez, petitioning the WBC for Canelo to move all the way up to cruiserweight and face the WBC champion there, Ilunga Makabu, next. Mike, what was your reaction to hearing Canelo might go that far up in weight?
I look at it two ways. On one hand, you have to acknowledge that it's a bold move, given the size difference. He'll probably be outweighed by at least 10 pounds. I'm guessing that WBC will lower its cruiserweight limit to 190 by then. And I'm guessing that Alvarez will come in around 180, something like that. And I get why he's doing it. He wants to win a title in a 5th division. He thinks that's his way of making history. On the other hand, I don't like it. He's too focused on titles when he should be more focused on who he's fighting. He fought Smith, Saunders, and Plant to become undisputed when I would rather he fought Benavidez, Charlo, Andrade, or the light heavyweights, one of the light heavyweights. You see what I mean? I'm dying, personally as a fan, purely as a fan, I'm dying to see Alvarez versus Benavidez. That's the fight, not Alvarez versus Makabu. I really don't like what he's doing.
That's an interesting point. So would you say do you view this as a challenge or a cherry pick?
I think you have to say it's at least somewhat of a challenge given Makabu's size and power. You know, he's a knockout guy too.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a cherry pick. Makabu's not, he's pretty good, but he's not in the class of the guys that I mentioned earlier, not even close. The gimmick, and that's kind of what it is that Alvarez is fighting a big guy, and that appears to be a really risky thing to do. In my opinion, in fact, it's only a mildly risky thing to do. Notice how he didn't pursue the best cruiserweight, Maris Brightus. He did the same thing at light heavyweight. He pursued Kovalev instead of Beterbiev or Bivol. And I get it. To be fair, Roy Jones, who's like one of my all-time favorite fighters, he did the same thing when he challenged John Ruiz instead of challenging Lennox Lewis. You know, Jones would have been eaten alive by Lewis, and he knew it. So it was... And, you know, on some level, it was the logical thing to do, which is, I think, what Alvarez and company are thinking.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I definitely think it's a challenge. I think it's a big challenge, in fact, simply because Makabu's so big. There are some limits. That is why you have weight classes. But to me, it's like deciding to walk on New York City subway tracks. Yeah, it's risky, but what's the goal? You know, in the case of Makabu and an extra belt in another division is nice, but does it really move the needle? I don't know. You know, thinking about Jones Ruiz, where you make a good point. Jones selected a weaker champion in Ruiz as opposed to the true heavyweight champion at that time, Lennox Lewis. But nevertheless, it was perceived not only as a challenge by fans, by hardcore fans, but casuals, because he was challenging for the heavyweight title, for a heavyweight title, and that was the hook, that was the catch. I don't think that challenging for the cruiserweight title carries the same sort of hump, you know. Then
Ruiz is better than Makabu too.
Yeah, that too. I mean, Roy Jones moving up to fight a top 5 heavyweight is what he did, and that was extremely impressive. But moving up to fight a cruiserweight, you know, I don't know. You mentioned the names before. Who do you want to see Canelo face next?
Well, I already spilled the beans. No hesitation. As a fan, it's Benavidez. That's the fight. They're the same size. They're both big, strong, talented guys. One's Mexican, the other's Mexican-American. I would probably pick Alvarez to win because of his experience, but I think it's about a 55-45 fight, which is more than acceptable. Honestly, it's one of the most compelling fights that can be made in boxing at any weight right now. Instead, it looks like he's going to be fighting an obscure cruiserweight. And I'm sitting here shaking my head.
Yeah, me too. But we will see. Nothing's been decided yet, so I don't, want to presume anything. Look, we could talk about this fight forever, but we have to move on to another fight we could talk about forever, and that is the PBC fight of the week. This Saturday, two undefeated world champions face off as WBC World Super Bantamweight Champion Brandon Figueroa and WBO counterpart Stephen Fulton Jr. face off in an excellent 122-pound world title unification bout from the Park MGM in Las Vegas, live on PBC on Showtime. We will start with the essentials.
Okay, here we go. Figueroa 22-0-1 with 17 knockouts. Fulton's 19-0 with 8 KOs. Figueroa 4-0-1 in his last 5 with 4 knockouts, which means he's stopping guys even as the competition gets better. Fulton 5-0 in his last 5, obviously 2 knockouts. Last fight for Figueroa was his upset knockout of Luis Neri this past May. Fulton's last fight was his unanimous decision over Angelo Leo. That was in January. Figueroa 74% knockout ratio, Fulton 42. Similar number of rounds. Figueroa 123, Fulton 119. Figueroa is a tender 24, Fulton 27, both guys in their prime. Figueroa turned pro in 2015, Fulton 2014. They both fight from an orthodox stance. Figueroa is a little taller, a little longer, 5'8". Fulton 5'6.5". Figueroa has a 72.5-inch reach, which is pretty long, and Fulton 70.5 inches. Figueroa is from Westlaco. I think I called it West Laco last time. Westlaco, Texas, and Mr. Fulton is a Philadelphian.
Such a. I mean, you look at on paper, so many good statistics on both sides. Aside from that, why is this such a great matchup?
Well, where do I start? I guess the styles, a brawler in Figueroa versus a boxer in Fulton, although we shouldn't put limitations on either one of these guys. Figueroa knows what he's doing in the ring. He creates the offense that he creates the situation that allows him to land the punches that he lands, is what I'm trying to say. And Fulton proved against Leo that he can beat a pressure fighter at his own game. They're both young. They're both in their prime. They're both unbeaten. They're both fun to watch. It's just like an ideal matchup.
Yeah, it really is. Most people see it as a 50-50 matchup going in. If Figueroa wins this fight, in your opinion, it means that he was able to do what successfully?
It means I'm going to tell you what I think a victory means for him. It means he beat a guy I had thought could rise into the top 5 pound for pound. I think with his style, his looks, with victories over Luis Neri and now Stephen Fulton, man, we're talking stardom for this guy. A win for Figueroa is a life changer. As far as the style or what he would need to do to win the fight, he's just going to do what he does, right? He's just going to come, and Fulton better be able to deal with it.
Yeah, for sure. What about Fulton? What does win mean for him, and how would he win?
Well, it means he did what he was supposed to do, at least according to the odds makers. He is favored to win the fight. He's the more talented guy. He should win. That said, he will have beaten 2 tough, respected volume punchers in succession. He will have proven that it's going to take more than a good pressure fighter to beat him. I think it's another step towards stardom for Fulton, and I think he's just going to have to do what he does. It's going to be a combination of boxing and standing toe-to-toe, whatever it takes to win. And I think Fulton's a really versatile fighter, and I think it's going to be difficult for Figueroa.
Does that mean you are picking Fulton?
I picked Neri to beat Figueroa, and I regretted it. That might happen again here, but yes, I'm going to go with Fulton. Again, I see him as the more gifted, more polished guy, if you will. He's also tough as nails, as he showed against Leo. I think he's going to wear down Figueroa with his blend of boxing and brawling. Figueroa is going to land some body shots in an effort to slow down Fulton, but I just don't think he's going to land enough to get the job done. I think Fulton's going to use his feet, that footwork, to keep himself at range where he's going to pick Figueroa apart a lot of the fight. And when they end up toe-to-toe, I think that Fulton's going to at least hold his own inside. I'm going to say Fulton by unanimous decision in a really fun fight to watch.
Yeah, I like that pick. I like Fulton by decision as well. I also think he's going to stand and trade with Figueroa a lot more than people might suspect, which could lead to someone getting, seriously hurt or even stopped.
Yeah.
I think both guys have enough power to hurt the other. This is a dangerous fight for both Figueroa and Fulton, and I'm glad they're stepping up to do it. I hate that there has to be a loser on this night, but I know the fans won't lose. Yeah, it's gonna be great, and looking forward to. I'll be happy whoever wins this fight. I didn't want to have to do this part, but quick update in our prediction league. Mike and I are now tied at 39-3. It happens, but I won't dwell on it.
Neck and neck as we close in on the championship rounds.
I'm resting right now. We'll see how the rest of the year shakes out, but it's coming down to the wire. One more note on Saturday night's card: 2 excellent bouts will also be televised. Undefeated 122-pounder Ra'is Ali, so some people call him the boogeyman of the division, is going to take on the tough Eduardo Baez, and some bantamweight action as well. Gary Antonio Russell facing Alejandro Barrios. We're going to take a quick break right here and be back with the week in review.
Unbeaten champ Brandon the Heartbreaker Figueroa.
Figueroa, from heartbreaker to ribbreaker,
has been on a collision course with undefeated champion Stephen Fulton Jr.
I'm the king of the 122-pound division.
Now the electrifying unification bout fight fans have waited for is here.
Another instant classic is on the horizon.
Brandon Figueroa versus Stephen Fulton Jr. for the 122-pound unification title, live on Showtime.
Last Saturday, we witnessed a fun battle between two of the best 147-pounders in the world. Undefeated WBO World Welterweight Champion Terrence Bud Crawford took on two-time champion Showtime Shawn Porter. Really fun back-and-forth battle until Crawford took over late, dropping Porter in the 10th, twice actually, and Shawn's father and trainer Kenny Porter waved it off. A controversial ending, which we'll touch on in a second. Mike, first, what were your thoughts on the fight?
You said it. It was a good fight for 7-8 rounds, and then it sort of became a showcase for Crawford. I thought Porter looked really good for a while. He boxed really well, fighting aggressively like he does, but in a really intelligent way. That made it sort of a chess match for the first half of the fight, which Crawford acknowledged. I think he called it a thinking man's fight for much of the fight, and that's what it was. I thought Porter still had a real chance of winning as late as round 9. I still thought he had a chance. That's how close it was. However, by then, Crawford had already begun the process of breaking Porter down. He countered really well, pretty much the whole fight, but he started putting his punches together more and more, which wore Porter down and opened him up to those big shots in round 10. Crawford is really good when he has vulnerable prey, and that's sort of what Porter became at the end.
Yeah, he's a great finisher. I thought it was good action, very close fight heading into the last 3 frames. Seeing what you saw, I thought Porter did a nice job making Crawford miss a lot, and he was busier. But once Crawford began to time him, and began using his jab, he separated himself a bit. Now, Kenny Porter is taking a lot of heat for stopping the fight when he did. What were your thoughts on the stoppage?
I thought the stoppage was fine. He was hurt. If Kenny Porter had allowed it to continue, he might have been hurt really badly. Did Shawn have some fight left in him? Probably, but there was no point in that time. I think that Crawford was taking charge, and bad things were only going to happen after that. So I like the stoppage. I'll add that I wasn't crazy about what Kenny Porter said afterward. His explanation for why he stopped it, that his son wasn't properly prepared. I just didn't see the point of saying that. And the worst thing about it is I thought it diminished what Crawford accomplished ever so slightly. I don't want to hear reasons why guys lose. I just want them to say the better man won tonight.
Yeah, and it didn't appear to me that Shawn was badly hurt. However, the 2 knockdowns, as you noted, put him down significantly on the cards, and he would have needed a KO to win. Plus, I don't think it would have been good for him to fight or attack Crawford in that desperate situation, given the kind of fighter Crawford is, might open up to some big counters. And I think Kenny realized that, and that the really hurtful punches were coming, and he didn't want to see his son end up like that. Who knows Sean better than Kenny Porter does? I'll defer to him, on this case. Now, this was Crawford's biggest test to date as a pro. Did his performance sway your opinion about him in any way?
Not at all. It just underscored what I've believed for a long time. The guy is the goods. I'll say this though. I hope others, those who have doubted him, give him a little bit more credit now. I think he deserves it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he proved it Saturday night. It didn't change too much for me. I didn't think it was a great performance, but that was due to him fighting a significantly better foe than he normally does in Sean Porter. I think he missed a lot. Didn't seem to find his range until Porter sort of hit a wall. But as you and I spoke about, off air, the wall was Terrence Crawford. Now, that said, he also showed, that is Crawford, that his power is real at 147. I think he's fully settled in, and he's dangerous from rounds 1 to round 12. We also saw some elite composure from him, and those attributes make him, live against anyone. After the fight, Sean announced his retirement. Were you surprised when you heard that?
Yes and no. Yes, because as I said, he looked like a champ for much of the fight, and he's only 34 years old. He could still beat most 147 pounders in the world, like almost all of them. And no, I wasn't surprised because he seemed to me to have like a foot inside and outside of the ring for some time. That's not a good place for a fighter to be. You have to be all in, or it gets even more dangerous than it already is. He's already begun his second career as a broadcaster, and he's good at it. Now I guess that'll be his focus. Although I have to add, I won't be shocked if he changes his mind and comes back at some point. That has been known to happen before.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't too surprised. I mean, he's fought everyone. He's got a great post-fight career lined up. What else does he have to prove? Speaking of careers, how will you remember Sean's now that he's retired?
One of the best 147-pounders of his generation, who was ready and willing to fight anyone you put in front of him. As he showed one last time on Saturday, he's the one that agreed to fight Crawford. He beat Julio Diaz, Devin Alexander, Paulie Malignaggi, Adrian Broner, Andre Berto, Danny Garcia, and Yordenis Ugas. That's an impressive list. And he has 4 losses, but 3 of those were so close they could have gone the other way if he had done just a little bit more in those fights. And he was always so much fun to watch, which is really important to me. And finally, he's one of the most liked guys in the business. He was just the complete package. We'll miss him as a fighter, but we still have him around as a commentator.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on this, the fact that he's a warrior, that he took on everyone. I don't know, but for some reason I feel like, you kind of listed everything that made Sean great, but when I look online, I see everyone refer to him as, he's a warrior, but I feel like that sort of diminishes Sean. This isn't Mickey Ward here. That's no disrespect to Mickey Ward, but
different level.
Yeah, but as you said, this is not just a warrior, but this is one of the best welterweights of this era. And as you also pointed out, this guy was a punch or two away from entering this Crawford fight with an undefeated record. He's an athletically gifted 2-time champion, loads of great qualities. More important, he was a world champion outside the ring as well. A real class act, and that's what I'll remember the most. Now, getting back to Bud, where would you like to see him go from here?
Well, this is my main hope. I hope the matchup with Porter was a breakthrough and that he'll continue to fight the best in the division now. Maybe I'm dreaming, but that's my hope. He's mentioned Keith Thurman. I like that fight. Maybe Josh Taylor moves up to fight him. That would be intriguing and legitimate because Taylor's undisputed at 140. And he'll go up to 47 at some point. But like Alvarez and Benavidez at 168, there is the fight at 147, and that's Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. That would be the biggest welterweight fight since Mayweather-Pacquiao. I know it's a fight a lot of fans would like to see. It has to happen pretty soon, though. Crawford isn't getting any younger. Please, boxing gods, let that fight happen.
Yeah, I think it's up to Bud. He did say he doesn't need Errol, so I'm curious to see what he does next. Perhaps Josh Taylor. Although I don't give Taylor much of a chance, particularly if he takes this fight in his first time at 147.
You're probably right.
But there is one name who says he's down for the get down. And he is our next guest. One of the biggest names in the sport, the man who once sat atop the welterweight throne and is plotting his return, but don't call it a comeback because he's been here for years. None other than Keith "One-Time" Thurman. Keith, first things first, happy birthday. How are you feeling this morning?
I'm feeling great, man. I had a nice little morning workout at my condo gym. Got the body waking up, moving good. 33, man. 33 and a father now. I mean, it's life, baby. We're progressing, man. We're evolving. The book of life just keeps on continuing, and I'm looking forward to each and every chapter along the way. I'm blessed. We're working to get back into the ring early next year, and I'm just looking forward to that, man. It's been a long time coming for myself and for the fans and for the welterweight division.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. So are you, aside from just working out, though, are you going to be doing anything special today?
I'm a little too focused.
Okay.
I'm not really treating myself, it's a weekday. I'm not really treating myself too much. I might be able to get something done over the weekend. Once you hit this age, it's like you celebrate your birthday when you want. The weekend before, the weekend after, you just get it in where you can fit it in.
Or not at all.
Right.
Or not at all. Just keep it moving like the sun rises and the sun sets, and it's another day in life.
Right.
But I'm most likely going to try to devote a little bit of time and get out and do something a little fun for myself later on this week.
Nice.
Keith, you mentioned fatherhood. How's that been going so far?
It's been a journey, man. There's no manual for that. There's no real blueprint. You just got to take it day by day. I have a lovely wife. She's doing an excellent job. I'm very blessed. And, my daughter, she's just getting more animated, just little by little, standing up, interacting, learning her voice. And it's a humbling experience, man, to be honest. There's a lot of things that, as a young man, they don't cross your mind until you get a little bit more in depth into the different layers of life. And fatherhood is definitely one of those layers where it brings the circle of life full circle. Whoever you are the makeup of your mother and father, regardless of how you want to look at it. You share DNA. And once when you have your own DNA looking back at you, that reflection, I mean, it just resonates. Like, she's a child from the infant to the 6-month, almost 7-month stage that she's about to be, so there's not a lot of dialogue, but just looking at her, looking at you, looking at her, and just that DNA, something about it resonates, and it's already speaking to you, and then the philosopher in me starts thinking about how all of us were children, and what does a child need? Love. So what does the world need? Love, and it sounds basic, it sounds fundamental, but it's just the way that it is, man. This is life, and it's a beautiful process, and my heart goes out to those who children don't get the love that they deserve in this life early on, because everybody deserves that love and a good environment, so Thanksgiving's coming up, so you better be grateful, count your blessings, and you can see how I'm already getting deep with it, because that's what this does, man. A child touches your heart, it touches your soul, and it makes you reflect on life.
Yeah, you're talking about the important things in life. I almost don't even want to go back into boxing, but I sort of have to, because that's why we're here. Has your time away and spending time with your family and your daughter, has that renewed your hunger for the sport?
I'm just not done, right? You're not done till you're done, for me, there's just more to do. I have more performances in me. I have plenty of warrior spirit and fight. I not only do I have my baby girl, but I just turned 33. I got 33 great reasons to keep fighting. I want to see myself mature in the ring. I want to look forward to not just being that young, hungry Keith Thurman. What's the mature Keith Thurman look like as we move forward? And to me, that's what this next chapter is going to be all about.
That's interesting. I like that. We're looking forward to that too. Now, we saw a battle between two top welterweights last Saturday, Terrence Crawford and Shawn Porter. Crawford retained his title with a 10th round stoppage. What were your thoughts on the fight?
It was a good fight, for TV, for ESPN. It was a great challenge for Crawford, one that he obviously was clearly up for the task. There was one thing that stood out to me though early on in the fight, and I don't know if you remember, the bell rung and Crawford's like doing something with his hands. He's like pushing his hands down, and like, I don't know if it's like, calm down, bro, calm down, all that wrestling, all that inside work. I think it was a little frustrating for him, or he could have been like talking that trash and been like, I'm going to put you down. I'm going to put you down. We can only hear commentators. We can't hear the fighters in the ring. So I could see that the fighters were talking to each other throughout the fight. I could see that there was a little bit of a dialogue. But, Crawford, he did what he had to do. He had to weather the storm. Anybody who really understands Shawn Porter and his style, you can't stop him from doing what he does. You just have to minimize the damage that you take while he's trying to put that onslaught on top of you. And Crawford was capable of doing that. Of course, it's a fight, so he did take some blows. But I think after the 5th round, going into the 6th, and definitely by the time we hit the 7th round, I think Shawn Porter slowed down a little bit. I think Crawford was whiffing a lot of quick check hooks and trying to get that uppercut. He was missing a lot of punches. And I think he calmed down too in the fight. And it almost looked like both fighters kind of slowed down just a little bit. But the way that Crawford slowed down, he slowed down in a way that instead of just throwing and flinch punches where you flinch into action, he was now hitting his mark. He was able to put some combinations together, and he was able to see where he needs to be placing these punches and throwing the punches from definitely the 7th round on. But I think he was starting to get his eyes tuned in the 6th round. So, I mean, it was just a great fight. The thing about Shawn is you keep coming in with the same tactic round after round after round after round against world-class fighters. It's bound that you're going to get timed. And I said it in a different interview that if Crawford stops Shawn Porter, it'll be the left uppercut. I just know styles makes fights, and I knew that if he was going to be in the southpaw position, I wasn't even sure he was going to be in the southpaw position for the majority of the fight, but he chose to fight that style. And I just thought that with my experience against Shawn, is you think you're going to catch him with a hook coming in, and he just keeps ducking, and you're like, all right, he ducks a lot, he has strong legs, but he's not going to duck every single hook until he keeps ducking every single hook. And then it's only natural that you got to find a new angle, and that next angle, the best angle, is an uppercut. So it wasn't a real surprise to me that was the punch of choice. It's just a matter of making it happen and getting the timing. I think Shawn just was getting a little too comfortable jumping in, and he didn't feint. He didn't set up. He wasn't working the triple jab late in the rounds like he has in the past. And due to that reason, he was a little bit more predictable, because it's the herky-jerky movement that can somewhat set off the timing. And he didn't do that in the 10th round. Obviously, we're in the 10th round, so you would expect his legs to slow down a little bit, some of his movement to slow down a little bit. But Crawford was able to take advantage of that. And then he's a great closer. He's a great finisher, and he showed that. And then, of course, we know that Shawn Porter got up and looked like he was capable of continuing the fight. But at that point, the fight was over. Shawn Porter would need a knockout to win the fight. And we've never seen Shawn Porter sustain that kind of punching power in the later rounds at any time of his career. So I think it's a legitimate decision on Kenny's behalf. His comments afterwards are one thing, but the overall decision in the moment is respectable.
Now, were you surprised at all that Crawford was able to stop Sean?
No, I think that, when somebody's coming in at you like that, it's definitely a possibility. And, his father stopped it. So, we can argue when I say we, I mean fighters. Us fighters can argue, should Sean have made it out of that round? Because we know how tough Sean can be. Could Sean have the craftsmanship to make it out of that round, or was it a matter of time that we were going to see the third and possible final knockdown of that round? There was plenty of time on the clock, so that too is a legitimate possibility. So it's a little bit up in the air on the overall, being KO'd factor. Spence put him down, didn't repeat it. I wobbled him, never put him down, never went in for any finishing blows. So, Crawford, it looked like he was looking for that anyways. It looked like he wanted to make a statement. I know he wanted to make a statement. He's been wanting to elevate himself in the welterweight division and set himself apart from previous champions like myself and the current champion, Errol Spence Jr. So, and then the other champion, Udonis Ugas. So that, in that way, he has set himself apart. But it still was, a typical Sean Porter fight at the end of the day.
Right. It seems Sean is sort of being used as a barometer between Crawford and Spence. Do you think it makes sense to compare victories over the same fighter, or is each fight just different?
Yeah, we like to use a measuring stick, I mean, as a spectator, you're obligated to do so. You really don't have any other tools as a reference point. So we do like to do that, but we've seen in the past that it is the ultimate styles that makes fights. And Sean Porter, being the champion that he is, he's one of the only welterweights that's gotten to face every top welterweight of his generation, starting with his loss to Kell Brook, his win over Danny, his loss to me, his loss to Spence, and now Crawford and his win over Ugas, so he's got 2 wins over 6 of the best welterweights of his time. So because of that, Sean's just a great person to try to compare people with. But when you're talking about Errol Spence and, you're talking about myself, Keith Thurman, and even Ugas, they're just different styles and very capable fighters, truly capable fighters. Not only, people that all beat Sean, but Ugas hasn't fought Spence, Spence and Thurman haven't fought, Crawford and Ugas haven't fought, Crawford and Thurman haven't fought, so when you do all this cross-referencing, there still is that what happens when, because you're looking at very talented welterweights. The welterweight division is just one of those stacked divisions when it comes to tremendous talent in that upper echelon. There's not like a big talent gap between a lot of these fighters.
Right. So, Spence and Crawford can both list Sean as, as their biggest win yet in their careers. But you beat Sean first, and some people are sort of writing you off after you lost to Pacquiao. Any thoughts on that? Is that fair?
No. We know how it is. You're only as good as your last fight. My last fight was over 2 years ago. people haven't seen me in action. That's one reason why we're truly looking forward to just getting back into action, to remind the fans, to remind the sport who Keith Thurman is, what Keith Thurman brings to the table of the welterweight division, and why you should never forget about Keith Thurman.
Very good.
But, but besides all that third person talk, it's boxing is just one of those short-term memory sports. At the end of the day, Crawford has great momentum with the stoppage. He stopped a fighter who just announced his retirement, upon which was never stopped prior to his last competitive fight last Saturday. So it's just a great place for him to be in his career. He's always been at the top. He's an undefeated champion. He has people on ESPN side arguing that he's pound for pound number one and all these different things. They think he's going to be the king of the welterweight division, but you must battle for the crown, and there's plenty of fights to go before we hit that finish line. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to getting back in the mix, being part of that mix, and just testing all these champions and climbing my way back up to champion status.
So you mentioned your layoff. It's been a couple of years. Was there ever a point, during that time where you thought maybe your run at the highest levels of the sport might be coming to an end, or did you always know that you'd be back?
Oh yeah, I mean, let's look at the numbers. I barely lost. 15 more punches and the fight is mine. Split decision, 1 point on the last judges' scorecards, which I believe when I look back, my instincts said that we were about to get a draw that night, and my instincts were correct in the 11th round. Apparently, there was a draw in the 11th round. I didn't put my foot on the gas, and I think he was able to walk away with the 12th round, which ultimately led to his victory and my defeat. And, there was a lot going on that year. It wasn't, I wasn't trying to compete against Errol Spence. I wasn't trying to compete against the young guys. I knew what kind of challenge I put in front of myself because I knew the condition that I was in 2019. But as a hardworking athlete, I was up for the challenge. I just did not commit to what needed to be done to walk away with that victory. It was very devastating. I'm the kind of fighter that always said, I'm not afraid to let it go. If you can beat me, because you're going to do it in my face and you're going to do it man to man. And that's what I love about the sport of boxing. But just because I've said that I got and I'm not afraid to let it go doesn't mean that I was looking forward to my first defeat, especially in a competition that's winnable. It's like LeBron James making it to game 7 and then missing the last shot at the buzzer. Nobody wants to be in that situation. And for me, and as an athlete, and other athletes most likely will agree, that's worse than many other outcomes, as being so close yet still falling short, because it's not on your team. It's not on anybody else. It was literally just on you, and you're the type of athlete that's capable of making the turnaround. I showed it in the later rounds. I showed it throughout the fight. I let my ego get the best of me after the knockdown. I was walking him down, pressing him, hoping that the judges were going to give me credit for moving forward, but I wasn't throwing my hands enough. So after a certain point, I knew I didn't lose every single round after 5 rounds, but I know I'm behind. So second half of the fight, I really needed to wake up and get these hands moving better. And that's what I was doing. But right at that final stretch, I didn't commit to what needed to be done at that level against Manny Pacquiao. You live and you learn. The philosopher in me understands that there are only 2 real outcomes in life: lessons and blessings. So it hurt for a while, but with a lot of reflection, there's so much to take away, right? They always say that there's more to take away in a loss than a victory. because one is not going to reflect in depthly on a victory. You're going to celebrate. When you take a loss, it puts you back to the drawing board. It makes you pinpoint your mistakes. It makes you pinpoint your flaws and your weaknesses and what you can do to strengthen yourself so that incident doesn't occur again in the future.
Wow. Now, you said you're coming back early next year. I wanted to know, is that for sure? And is there an opponent that you have in mind?
Yes, that's for sure. I have opponents on the table right now, and we are looking forward to an announcement most likely after this up-and-coming holiday.
Now, you've had such a long layoff, obviously compounded by the pandemic. How do you feel physically, and how long has it been since you can say your body was 100%?
Well, it's better now than it's ever really been as a competitor. You know, I've gone through many different things as a competitor, but you know, this layoff was not ideal. It's definitely not what I wanted. I remember when Sean Porter was one of the first fighters to get back in the ring at the start of the COVID, and he fought in studios with no fans. There was a small opportunity for me to take that event, and in retrospect now, I wish I would have, because there was no way of me knowing at that time that my layoff would have been this long. I was getting prepared this year to get back late November, December, after the Pacquiao fight, working that event. I was doing good on my weight management. I was in the gym, and I came home with COVID from Vegas. You know, Vegas was wilding out that weekend, I can tell you for sure. And it's not just, fight. The fight's one thing, but Vegas is just a whole nother thing. There's something happening here, there, everywhere, So it was a crazy night. It was nice to travel. It was nice to be out. It was nice to be back in Vegas, since I haven't been there since my performance with Pacquiao. But what was not nice was coming back home with COVID, whether it was Vegas, whether it was the planes or anything of that nature. At the end of the day, it put me bedridden. I'm in lockdown. I'm not hitting the gym. I'm not doing anything for 2 weeks till I test negative again. And then we slowly got into the gym. Wasn't feeling 100 for the first week. The next week, my lung capacity and other things started to turn around, and we were able to get moving again. But that kind of set back the approximate timing on how I can get an effective camp in. And that's why we unfortunately had to push it back into early next year.
So how are you feeling right now?
Oh, I feel great. I'm happy to be losing weight, moving faster, feeling stronger week by week. About to start upping the cardio, which will shred the weight loss even further and get my conditioning up. And like I said, I'm just looking forward to showcasing my skills and talents once again. I do not believe that I'm truly going to skip a beat, because I've been in and out of the gym throughout this whole time. So it doesn't really feel like the layoff that it is. It was different in 2019 when I came back and fought Josecito Lopez. That was a big layoff, upon which I was very inactive during that layoff. So I feel a difference, even though this layoff happens to be longer, not ideal at all, but I don't feel the same way. I feel more prepared mentally and physically, and I just look forward to getting back in the ring, creating some buzz, and then hopefully getting some bigger and better fights later in 2022.
Gotcha.
You mentioned weight, Keith. Will the fight be at 47, or will you come in a little heavier than that?
Depending on the opponent and the circumstances, I normally never have a problem making 147. And where I'm at right now is really just a 20-pound gap, which is and a way easier camp than what I did to myself in 2019, where I had 35 pounds to lose to fight Jose Cito Lopez. And then I went to Tokyo. I ate a whole cow, and I came back right back at 182 to start my camp with Manny Pacquiao. So once again, a 35-pound weight deficit that I had to do in an 11-week camp for Manny Pacquiao. So weight management is actually going to be one of the major focuses and key points for the rest of my fighting career. You don't want your whole camp to be, how much weight am I losing this week? I need to lose weight. I need to lose weight. We're going to be able to focus more on fight strategy, fight plan, and high intensity intervals that will hopefully bring me back into a shape and conditioning to remind the world who Keith Thurman truly is.
Now, do you think, you mentioned, sort of getting back in the ring, getting your feet under you, and then looking toward a big fight later in the year. You did that for Manny Pacquiao. You did mention the weight being a factor, but is one fight enough? Because we saw like with Andre Ward, for instance, it took him about 3 fights, before he was really, Andre Ward after that layoff.
I think if I maintain my body properly, I think it will be enough. Just because, I'm still right in the prime of my career, and I just believe that, my body has muscle memory, and all we have to do is remind it what its job is. And then the big factor is after one fight, how much do I let myself regain? And how soon do I get back into the gym? So, if, of course, I don't think it would hurt to go ahead and maybe do 2 fights and take a big welterweight battle, maybe October, November of 2022 at the end of the day. I don't think that would hurt me. But I just like great fights, man. This isn't the amateurs no more. I'm here for the legacy. I'm here for the ride. I'm here for the roller coaster. I'm here for the entertainment. I'm here for the highs and the lows. And, I just want it, man. So I believe that if I truly focus, dedicate myself, we can make it happen.
I hear you. So, how have you been looking in the gym? How you feeling?
Well, I feel strong. I was feeling a little slow due to the weight that I was holding on to. So now that I've dialed in on the diet, I've been able to drop some pounds. I mean, I feel like I'm walking faster, So I'm just truly looking forward to everything that I'm doing with my strength training, my mobility training. I'm getting my body to move faster and feeling lighter every single week. And I believe that, I've seen it in camps before. We start the camp, my sparring partners are hitting me a little more than they should, Like I come home with a little blemish here and there, and wifey likes, what's that? And I'm like, that's work, baby. Don't worry about it. That's work. Okay. That's what work looks like for your husband. All right. But, of course, week after week after week after week, eventually that champion shows up again. And, I end up being the dominant factor every single day. And so that's just what we're trying to get back to.
Keith, we mentioned earlier the 2 current big dogs are Spence and Crawford. Do you have a preference? Who would you rather fight?
Both are great, whomever would be willing to give me the opportunity is the one that I'd be truly willing to fight. I like that. I know Bud Crawford was mentioning me in his interviews leading up to the Sean fight. Post fight, he didn't really say any names because he said he's tired of saying names. But I know how to speak code. I get your code. You're tired of saying my name because there hasn't been that much responses. I've been a family man. I've been keeping it tight with COVID, keeping homebound here in Florida. I would have loved to have been at the fight, but like I said, last time I went out to Vegas, coming home messed me up. So I don't want to take any risk and chances. I want to stay at home. I want to stay focused. I want to stay getting ready for next year. And I would love a Crawford fight if he's trying to mix it up with more PBC guys. I would love a Spence fight. That's been in the works for a long time coming. It was always my ideal plan to get past Manny Pacquiao and then get ready to unify with Errol Spence. You know, I know for a fact that certain fighters don't have an interest in Keith Thurman because Keith Thurman is not the undefeated champion that he once was, even though it's only one loss on my record. But at the end of the day, I don't currently hold a world title. So that might make Spence want Ugas more than a Thurman. And it just is what it is. But I will remind people who I am and what I do when I get back into the ring. And hopefully we can create enough buzz to, to get these big fish to take a bite, because, none of these young guys ever beat me. Sean Porter didn't beat me. Danny didn't beat me. And none of these other guys have beaten me. I've only been beaten by one veteran, a champion of champions, a Hall of Famer. And it just is what it is. Once when I get back in action, I know that the fans are going to support. I know that the fans have been waiting for a long time. And I know that the real fans haven't forgotten what it looks like when Keith Thurman's in the ring. It's always a great fight. And that's what I want to do. That's what I love to do in the welterweight division, is bring some of the most exciting fights at 147. I still believe that all the best fights are Thurman fights. Thurman versus Crawford, Thurman versus Spence, Thurman versus everybody. I just think we have the potential to really entertain. When it comes to styles and matchups, I just think that the way that I bring it in the ring truly just makes a great fight, similar to Sean Porter, but with more boxing and more methodical approaches. And really what I do and what I tend to do and what I'm going to be focusing on is always making those adjustments, the adjustments that I need to do to get the victory. I let myself get blindsided once. I'm not going to let it happen again. I'm going to stay focused round by round by round, lock them in, do what I need to do to be right back on top.
Keith,
Awesome.
we're looking forward to seeing how this all unfolds for you. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
No problem, guys. I appreciate it.
Enjoy your birthday.
Happy birthday.
Will do, man. Maybe I can squeeze in a donut or something.
Small donut hole. Donut hole.
A donut hole, one donut hole with a candle on top. Let's see what I can squeeze in. Maybe I'll just hop in the sauna so I can fit it in my diet.
Very good.
Not bad. Can't wait to see you back, Keith.
Yeah, man. I can't wait to get back too, man, and re-spark up this welterweight division. I know I'm fully capable of doing it. And I just need to remind these people with their short-term memory. But don't worry, it'll be coming soon.
All right, sounds good. Looking forward to it. Take care.
Take care, man. Stay blessed, fellas.
Unbeaten champ Brandon the Heartbreaker Figueroa
Figueroa, from heartbreaker to ribbreaker,
has been on a collision course with undefeated champion Stephen Fulton Jr.
I'm the king of the 122-pound division.
Now the electrifying unification bout fight fans have waited for is here.
Another instant classic is on the horizon.
Brandon Figueroa versus Stephen Fulton Jr. for the 122-pound unification title, live on Showtime.
All right, it's time for Mike and I to go toe to toe. This week we're listing our top 5 pound for pound fighters today in ascending order. Of course, Mike, the floor is yours.
I just want to give preface this with a short comment. We always talk about pound for pound, Ken and I, off the podcast, sometimes on the podcast, and the biggest thing is like, what is pound for pound? What does it mean? Like, what's the criterion? It seems like everybody's got a slightly different, criteria that they use. Ken uses or emphasizes resume a little bit more than I do. I emphasize resume, but I put a little bit more weight on the eye test than Ken does. So I just wanted to sort of explain where we're coming from going into this before we give our list. Anyway, number 5 for me is the aforementioned Errol Spence Jr. First, I think his ability to beat a prime, absolutely locked in Shawn Porter was actually a remarkable feat, probably underappreciated. And I just think he's an outstanding all-around fighter. He can box, as he demonstrated against Mikey Garcia. He can brawl, as he did with Porter. Most great fighters are versatile, and I think he certainly is versatile. He strikes me as, and maybe more important than anything, he strikes me as a guy who's going to find a way to win fights no matter what that is, which is the bottom line of the sport.
Yeah, I agree with you regarding Mr. Spence, and I will touch on him in a little bit. I actually struggled with this. I narrowed it down to 2 people, Alexander Usyk and Gervonta Tank Davis. I'm going to go ahead and give the slight nod to Mr. Usyk here, coming off that remarkable victory over Anthony Joshua this year. So I've got him slightly ahead of Gervonta Tank Davis, who's at one point held titles in 3 divisions, although in this era it's not quite the same as when Henry Armstrong did it. But Usyk's run at cruiserweight and at heavyweight lands him at number 5 on my list.
Just a shout out to Tank. I thought about Tank also. Tank might be as talented as anybody on these lists. Yeah. It's just he just needs maybe a little bit more time. Because I have no doubt or little doubt that he's going to end up in the top 5. Anyway, good transition because my number 4 is Alexander Usyk. Usyk was already on pound for pound list as the undisputed cruiserweight champion. I mean, the guy's got a crazy skill set. With average power being his only liability, if you want to call it that, I think he has enough power to beat anybody. And then he moves up to heavyweight and beats one of the top guys, Anthony Joshua, convincingly. I don't think he beats Fury, but man, this guy is a special fighter.
Yeah, I don't even know anymore with Fury. No, I wouldn't pick him to beat him.
It's a bad matchup in my opinion.
But what's scary to me is this guy's only going to get better. I mean, he's had only 3 fights at heavyweight. So I mean, imagine what he'll look like in another fight or 2 and when he fully settles in. And guys his size typically they don't age as quickly as the lower weight division. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's still going strong in another year or so. But yeah, Fury's probably a bridge too far. My number 4 might cause a little controversy, but it shouldn't. And I'll explain why. It is Terrence Bud Crawford. And you say, well, why is he so low, especially coming off the biggest win of his career? But that's not low. I think it just speaks to what the other guys have done. But let's talk about the great things that Terrence Crawford has accomplished thus far. Obviously undisputed at 140, title at 135, and now coming off an exceptional win at 147 over Mr. Shawn Porter. Again, I put a lot of emphasis into who you beat. I think this win solidifies T-Bud in the top 5. And if you go just beyond the name, but by eyeballs, then you probably have a strong case to put Crawford as high as number 1. But as you said, I believe this could be the start of a great welterweight run for him, and I want to see it.
Okay. My number 3 is Naoya Inoue. Oh, I'm going to get back to Crawford in a little while. My number 3 is Naoya Inoue. Now, I think one could argue that Inoue should be number 1. I mean, what can't the guy do? He has the natural gifts, the boxing ability. He's got crazy punching power. And I think he proved against Nonito Donaire that he's one of the toughest guys in the sport, fighting with a broken orbital bone, I think it was. Most guys quit when they have that. He kept fighting Nonito Donaire even though that happened. Some will point to that fight as a sign that he's human because he didn't dominate Donaire, but I focus more on him fighting through the injury and Donaire being a future first ballot Hall of Famer. Naoya Inoue is a great fighter.
Yeah, indeed he is, and we'll talk about him I'll talk about him in a little bit. My number 3 is Errol Spence Jr., who the unified champion at 147. Beyond that, just I think partially due to the injuries and his inactivity, a resume that's really, really overlooked. Aside from beating Sean Porter, he also beat Danny Garcia. He also beat Kell Brook when Kell Brook was one of the top 2 fighters in the division. And lest we forget, excuse me, a lot of people like to downplay the Mikey Garcia win. Oh, he was just a lightweight. No, sir. He also had a title at 140 pounds. Lest we forget, he convincingly beat Sergey Lipinets. And the Mikey Garcia that Errol Spence fought was a 4-division titleist, an undefeated 4-division titleist, 35-0 with 30 knockouts, a future Hall of Famer. And Errol shut him out 12 rounds to nothing. I think that's an extremely impressive win to go along with the other slew of impressive wins that he has. And hoping he comes back and hoping that we get to see him fight your Dennis Ugas next.
Yeah, I mean, again, I love Errol Spence. He could end up number 1 on this list, depending on how things play out. The guy can do it. He's a winner. He could do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let us go to number 2. Who do you got?
Okay, my number 2 is Canelo Alvarez. Sorry, I've said this a bunch of times. I have tremendous respect for Alvarez, who I believe has fought and beaten as many or more highly rated fighters as any active fighter, which is something to be proud of. He's a warrior. He'll fight anybody, and then some. And with only 1 loss, he's proven himself over and over again. He's one of the best of the era and a future first ballot Hall of Famer. But, yes, there's a but. Just because he's beaten more top-tier fighters than anyone else doesn't make him the best fighter in the world. He's a powerful guy who turned himself into an outstanding boxer, a really, really good boxer. But I don't think he has the natural gifts of Inoue and my number 1 guy. Plus, some believe he lost twice to Triple G. Some believe he also lost to Erislandy Lara. Would he be number 1 if he lost even one of those fights to Triple G? I don't know. I'm just sort of asking that question. I don't mean to disrespect Canelo. Great fighter. I just don't think he's the best in the world.
That's fair. I completely disagree, as Canelo Alvarez is my number 1 fighter, and I'll touch on that in a second. However, my number 2 is Naoya Inoue, who, like Terrence Crawford, a 3-division world champion, unified bantamweight champion right now, and if you go by eyeball test, is as good as any boxer in the world today. When someone say, well, why do you have him number 2 and you have Crawford number 4? I just think that Inoue has beaten better opposition. Say, wow, Nonito Donaire was old. Well, Nonito Donaire is currently a world champion because after that fight, he won a world title in impressive fashion against a good opponent. So I think that Inoue has him beaten in terms of resume. Now, in terms of in the ring, again, I think he's up there with anybody, and I certainly understand why some would have him number 1 pound for pound. But that's true of anybody, in my top 5. Really, I think it's just all opinions after that. And I assume your number 1 is Mr. Crawford?
Oh, yeah, Mr. Crawford. So this was easy for me. Crawford was my number 1 before his fight with Sean Porter. So who everyone deemed the stiffest test of his career, well, he passed the test, which only strengthens his argument for being number 1. To what degree, it depends on the person, but obviously he strengthened his argument. I know he still doesn't have a resume as deep as Alvarez's and some of the others, including Inoue. But I believe he's fought, I think Cliff Roll told me that he's fought 12 ranked fighters, and he's pretty much dominated all of them in the end. That speaks loudly to me. And to say that he passes the eye test is an understatement, in my opinion. Crawford's only apparent weakness, again, if you want to call it a weakness, is that he can be hit. However, I think that has more to do with his willingness to take risks in the ring than any defensive liability. And of course, there's his age. He's 34. We'll see how much longer he can fight at this level. But right now, he's a really, really good fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I have no issues with him being pound for pound on your list or on anyone else's list. I think he showed a lot last Saturday, and that's not to take away from all his other accomplishments. What he did on last Saturday simply underscored what he's shown throughout his career. So I'm glad that he got that opportunity, and he certainly took advantage of it, and to become the first person to stop Sean Porter, any version of Sean Porter, is truly impressive. Now, that said, I got to go with my boy Canelo. Number one, I hear what you're saying. I just think that he's beaten so many good fighters that it's just easy to forget, from the Laras and the Trouts and the Danny Jacobs and, becoming undisputed and the Golovkins. And I just, aside from, hey, I don't love the idea of a Makabu fight, but aside from that and Rocky Fielding and so forth, I think his resume is absolutely mind-blowing, easily the best on this list as far as I'm concerned. And he also has the skill. I think he's someone that, like Crawford, does what he needs to do to win. He showed excellent defense against Danny Jacobs. Proved he was a great stalker. He's got great power, great chin, great ring IQ, disciplined, well-conditioned. Just a great example all around. And not only that, he's the face of boxing, as he's shown with that fight with Caleb Plant, 800,000 pay-per-view buys. No question in my mind that Canelo Alvarez is the top pound-for-pound fighter in the world.
Yeah, it's hard to dispute. I mean, I'll dispute the very last thing you said, but otherwise, it's, everything you said is true. I mean, I have mad respect for the guy. But again, for me, it's not an accumulation of wins that makes you the best fighter in the world. Either you are the best fighter or you're not. I've told this story before on the podcast, but I think I could tell it again. It's appropriate now. When I was at the ring, we were trying to decide. If you recall, Pacquiao had ascended to number one pound for pound when Mayweather was in one of his retirements, and then Mayweather came back and he beat Marquez, and so we were in this position like, what do we do now? And my thought at the time was, well, Pacquiao he's earned the spot, he's earned number one, so you can't just come back and take over number one. You just can't do it, especially considering what Pacquiao had done. I mean, he went on that crazy run where people were comparing him to Henry Armstrong. And so anyway, so we kept Pacquiao at number one, but in retrospect, it was just stupid. I mean, obviously Mayweather was a better fighter than Pacquiao, even at that time. So that, and then a few things that happened subsequent to that, sort of changed the way I look at pound for pound. I really just try to step back and say, who's better, taking weight out of the equation. And at that time it was Mayweather, and right now I think it's really, for me, it's I put Alvarez too, but really for me it's either Crawford or Inoue.
I like that story, but I feel like it sort of underscores my point, and I think that unless I'm wrong, when Mayweather beat Juan Manuel Marquez, he was the number 2 pound for pound fighter in the world. Sure, he was moving up 2 divisions. I'm not even sure if it was 2 divisions. He might have toyed with 140 at one point or another and then went back down to 135. But even if it were, he was considered the number 2 pound for pound fighter in the world. And the fact that Mayweather the 2 divisions was offset by the fact that Floyd Mayweather hadn't fought in 2 years, coming back to fight a fighter of that caliber. So I feel that a shutout, not even competitive, a clear shutout of Juan Manuel Marquez is enough to solidify the fact that Floyd Mayweather was number one. He earned it right there with that victory. And that's the importance of fighting and beating top guys. Plus, we talk about eyeball test. Anybody who saw him that night, he certainly looked worlds better than any other fighter on the planet.
Because he was.
Yeah, exactly. As far as I'm concerned, that was an excellent performance, and he never stopped, really. The Mosley fight after that and so forth. But yeah, so I completely agree with you. I'm sure we'll get lots of feedback on that and on this week's show, period. We want to thank Keith Thurman for stopping by, and to you guys, of course, for listening. For myself and Mike, be sure to check back in next week for more interviews, more boxing talk right here on the PBC Podcast.